Zero trust architecture. On a surface level, it's quite clear, right? Zero trust. It means I don't have any trust. I have zero trust to you. And whenever we join a company or we're already working at a company and IT department or someone from relevant department tells you that our company uses zero trust policy, you're like, yeah, that's fine. Okay, that's clear. But is it really clear? Is it really fully clear to us what zero trust architecture is? Because especially people who have worked in office setting 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they remember that the way access would be granted was different. The way we could serve in the network, the way network was segmented was different. So looking from a decade ago and looking at what we have now, zero trust architecture model as a philosophical model in the way we grant access in a company, in a wider, maybe in a cooperation between companies, it has changed the security model that IT department follows. On a surface level, it sounds like something very, very simple, but realistically, it's literally similar to as if you follow civil law one day and a different law system another day. In this video, we will explore technicalities of zero trust model, when we can say that we have a zero trust model in our organization, and why zero trust model is important. To start with the basics, let's review what we had before zero trust model. So we had a perimeter-based security model, meaning that it worked on inclusion. What would it mean? Imagine I'm joining an accounting department today, and IT guy, he says, okay, you're joining accounting department. You're one of us now. Yeah, that's cool. You get all the access that all of your colleagues have, because I'm sure you will need all of it. And if they have it, you can have it too. Enjoy. I hope you will like working at our company. And this security model was prone to attacks. It was prone to different things. Like, first thing that comes to your mind, of course, it's insider threat. Because I can become an insider threat within a company, and a person who has been granted access without needing that access can infiltrate certain systems the person is not supposed to. For example, at a software company, someone working at an accounting department is not supposed to see software code of a program that the company is selling, because then it can explore the secrets within that code if that person can code and can understand and read code, right? Meaning that this was no longer possible with insider threat, with remote work, right? When you watch the Office series, you can see that everyone comes to the office 9 to 5 every single day. They do have traveling salesman positions that they give to Danny and Parker, but it simply means that this is their job to constantly travel and sell papers somewhere. But realistically, a decade ago, all of us would go to the office for work, right? Remote work wasn't as common, except freelancers and etc. But how do you manage infrastructure in nowadays when you have so many remote workers, when you have people who work in hybrid settings? They work certain days from home and certain days they work from the office. It's becoming tricky because these people, they connect, although they use company laptops, they may use their own phones to have Outlook on their phone, to have different company-related applications. Again, perimeter-based model, does it address the threats that can come from unauthorized devices on the network? So the person itself cannot be liable for if his or her device was infiltrated. And then again, the network was infiltrated as a result. So we have remote work, and then we have cloud infrastructure, right? So some companies moved all of their assets, all of their infrastructure to the cloud. Other companies moved half of their infrastructure on the cloud. So it's sort of hybrid. Some of their infrastructure is still hosted in their servers in server rooms, and other part of it is hosted in the cloud. And some companies operate in a multi-cloud model. They have some departments, some networks are built on one cloud provider, others are built on another cloud provider like AWS, Azure, Google and others have on-premise infrastructure, which makes it again difficult with the perimeter security model. Where does our security model start? With multi-cloud infrastructure, like is it in AWS? Are we covering Azure? Are we covering Google Cloud? And then we have on-premise, and then it's a lot of things to manage, and we get prone to human error. So any human that can forget about certain server in AWS and not put AWS IAM permissions correctly, right? And it can be overlooked and result in loss of code, in loss of secrets, in data breaches that can affect company reputation, etc., etc. So maybe I have scared you, but the reality is that in the current day, perimeter-based security model is not relevant. It might be relevant for very small organizations, but it's not relevant for any organization that has 150 at least employees and more than that. So what is the basic postulates of zero trust architecture? Zero trust architecture thinks that you need to verify explicitly every user, every device, every location, meaning that nothing can be overlooked and nothing can be discounted. Just because some colleague named Jack, who is my friend, and he is working in, say, software development, and I'm working in IT, it doesn't mean that just because he's my friend, I need to close my eyes on the fact that he's using his own laptop for work, that he's introducing some other devices to the network that he's not supposed to introduce, right? So we verify explicitly, no matter what, every user, every device, includes laptops, includes mobile phones, right? And from every location, focusing on location, there are some locations that companies don't want you to work from. So for example, some companies after Russia-Ukraine war, they introduced certain rules that you cannot work from Russia, because if government comes to your apartment, seizes your laptop, according to our laws, government can infiltrate our data. So location is also very important, that we keep an eye what location this employee is working from. Is it the location we agreed on for tax purposes also? If this person is tax resident, he pays tax in the UK, then he's working from the UK. And then if he's not working from the UK, then it brings up different questions about tax, about the amount of salary he is entitled to based on the standard of living of another country. So everything is verified explicitly from different spectrums, right? From very, very different standpoints, it's reviewed and verified. Then we give least privilege access, minimum level of access. I'm sure you have heard of this many, many times. And sometimes when we hear something a lot of times, we start discounting this. Okay, least access, least privilege, least privilege. I know what it's about. I know what this fuss is about. This is least privilege. But what actually least privilege means? It means that when you are introduced to company network, by default, you might not have access levels that you even need to do your job. So it doesn't mean that IT gives you all access levels possible, right? Obviously not the ones that CEO would have, but you're getting more access levels than you need. And then IT gets problems with that. What you get is the very minimum level. And then if you need more, you log tickets, you reach out to IT department, and you start getting more access as you require in your job. So it means that employees get into a position where they become more proactive in letting IT know what access they need for their job and what access they don't need. And that's exactly what least privilege access means. So you are given, in many instances, even less access that you're supposed to have. You keep acting proactively. If you need more access, you ask the company to give more access, but not vice versa, when IT gives you more access and then you don't need it, and then realistically something can happen when you have more access than you need to. The third postulate is that you always assume breach. You always assume that attackers are here. What does it mean? Like, it's easier said than done, right? Attackers are here. Okay, then what? Then I stand in front of my servers and protect them? Like, what happens when attackers are here? When you assume breach, these postulates come with certain procedures that you need to have in place. So you need to have a step-by-step model. What happens when attacker is here? Do we have a quick buttons to turn off certain servers or to protect certain servers or change configurations very quickly. So sometimes we may have 1,000 servers on AWS and 1,000 servers in Azure and 500 servers in on-premise. Do we have a quick way to manage these servers, to introduce certain configuration very quickly? But in cloud, it's especially easier because you have configuration managers in cloud, like not the human managers, but as a service configuration managers, through which you can push configurations to several servers. But do we have this plan B? Do we have a procedure where our configuration manager is ready to push change configurations when we need to, is ready to turn off certain servers when we need to? These are important questions because realistically, again, this is accepted as a very basic step and overlooked. They're like, okay, we assume breach. Now, let's have a T now. But that's not how it works. Assuming breach means having step-by-step procedure with a laser focus on how each step is executed. And ideally, what many companies do, they test it. So if there is a failover plan, if there is a disaster recovery plan, they test it. They do similar to when we have these sound alarm tests in the offices when the alarm goes off. In the very same fashion, they test this plan to make sure that it works as intended. On a more granular level, like imagine we are a perimeter-based security model and then we need to change our philosophy. We need to become a company with zero trust architecture. Where should we start? Because it sounds like a lot to do based on what we have discussed so far. The first and foremost step to start with would be to identify critical assets. So what servers have information that is of critical importance to our company? Which contains products of our company. So these servers are critical. Which servers carry personal information of our employees, health-related information of our employees? So this information is also critical. We again identify the assets that are very critical to our infrastructure. There are some servers that can be created for testing, for test environments. Are they as critical? So again, it's a questionable matter because maybe they're not as critical and can go lower on a priority scale. Map data flows. With cloud infrastructure, especially when there are several clouds involved, it's very difficult. It can be very difficult to understand where the data going from and to. Right? So what are we doing? We might have certain layer of private network in one cloud, then public network in another cloud. A critical step here would be to identify the data flows, where our data goes, where our data is critically stored, where it's going through when it's in transit, where it's going to when it's data at rest, and etc. And then monitor and adapt. So when the company has done certain steps and it adapted zero trust architecture, that might not be enough to say that, yes, now we have zero trust architecture. Zero trust architecture also entails agility and adaptability. You review what's going on in your company, you review the logs, you review the incidents, and then you review what is best practice or good practice recommendations in the industry. And based on that, you constantly monitor both internal processes and external innovations, if you will. Sometimes the companies publish new security threats, right? Or WASP-10, cybersecurity threats. And you need to be on a lookout and monitor and adapt these things all the time. What are the key components of zero trust architecture? Because on a philosophical level, you can say, yeah, we assume attackers are here, we do give people least privilege. But what are more specific components to tell us that certain company or department has a zero trust architecture security model? First and foremost, it's identity and access management, IAM. If you watched my previous videos about cloud, or you have passed any certifications on cloud, on IT, you might know that IAM comes in as a built-in service with many different cloud providers, including AWS and Azure, so that identity and access management is easier. This is a crucial point that you need to have your control on, depending on what users are added to what groups. What group of users have certain rights. Rule of thumb is that add users to the groups and then give access to groups instead of giving access to individual users. It may sound again simple, but in an organization with thousands of employees, your control on user access needs to be very granular, and you need to keep an eye on IAM policies both in the cloud and within your on-premise organization, and possibly consolidate them using additional software. Second step that many companies use at the moment is multi-factor authentication, meaning that other than password, your employees need to enter something more in order to access company device and company network, right? It can be a telephone number, it can be an authenticator, it can be some biometric details. For some in banks, I saw that people have a specific devices to put their fingers on, and they authenticate using fingertips. So depending on the company, there are different multi-factor authentications used, but it has become paramount to have several authentication factors, and to make sure that the ticket is updated regularly. Meaning that when you log in to a certain laptop, you are issued an authentication ticket. It happens in the background, you don't notice it. And then that authentication ticket has a time to live. It's certain time before the ticket expires. It can be 1 week, it can be 10 days. And after this time, you are required to use authentication app again. You're required to use your mobile number again, which means that you need to control the time when your ticket expires. You can't have tickets that last for months and months and employee doesn't have to re-authenticate. This is not sustainable, and you need to keep a close eye on your ticket's expiration date. Then micro-segmentation. So micro-segmentation means that smaller segments of network might be easier to manage from access perspective than bigger segments. What does it mean? So we might have an accounting department, even division within the company, right? And that accounting division can have 60 employees. 10 employees might work in accounts receivables. 10 employees can be working in expenses department, that they calculate and work on expenses. 10 employees can work in the reporting. So do we have a local area network, LAN, or private network, network for the whole accounting department with 60 employees, or do we have private segmented network for smaller departments within that division? Do we have one for receivables, one for expenses, one for reporting? Well, zero trust architecture says that microsegmentation is a superior model of a superior way of dividing your network to macro segmentation, when bigger departments have one network, or sometimes the whole company is on the same private network. Micro segmentation allows you more flexibility. You can manage it better. You can give one access to one department and then prohibit it in another department, although they are part of the same division. So in accounting, not every colleague, not every person working in accounting should have access to employee salaries, to compensation information, right? And microsegmentation would allow you to hide that information from accounting employees that don't work with employee compensation details, right? Fourth component is continuous monitoring, proactivity. We've covered that already, meaning that IT shouldn't just focus on some hardware and software issues, similar to IT Crowd. Was it the series, in British series, like where he was like, did you try turning it off and on again? Right? And this shouldn't be the whole point of IT work. IT should be continuously monitoring for processes, access processes within an organization, and apply common sense and logical thinking to the way processes are built. Continuously apply them. So for example, during some transition in the company, accounting team needed access to certain software. But then after the transition, they no longer need access to that software. So should we grant them this access? Should we continue with their licenses for that software? Of course, no. So you should constantly use common sense and logic when deciding on access policies and rules within organization. And also the last but not least, endpoint security. Many companies already have this, but last but not least, we need to repeat how important it is. So some companies allow bring your own device, right? They allow you to introduce your mobile phone to the network. Not every company provides mobile phones, meaning that you might have a weaker endpoint security on that employee's mobile phone when that mobile phone is introduced into your network. Higher endpoint security would allow you to control the apps that employee use directly for work and set your own configuration on those apps. What does it mean? So for example, you're using Outlook, Microsoft Outlook for work. Work blocks that application, meaning that you can't change any configurations on that application. And work implements their own configurations to that app. So you can't take a screenshot of an email in Outlook of neither your personal emails nor your work emails. And that's something, a configuration pushed to your device from the company. There are a lot of ways to do that nowadays, and endpoint security shouldn't be overlooked with the amount of additional devices brought to the network. It can be iPads, it can be any other tablets, it can be mini iPads, it can be second, third phones, as some people tend to have them. Zero Trust architecture has grown in popularity and has grown in significance given current network setups. So its motto is never trust, always verify, as we have covered so far, based on its postulates and based on its components. One of the biggest companies, biggest organizations that adopted Zero Trust architecture on a legal level is US federal government. It has an executive order on improving cybersecurity, and within that executive order, they cover how they are going to implement Zero Trust architecture to their networks in order to increase their security posture. Then second company is one of many as well, is Google. They have a procedure called Beyond Corp, which covers the Zero Trust architecture and how the company follows the principles and postulates of that architecture within its network. Given that it has a lot of remote workers, it has multi-cloud architecture, and obviously a lot of employees introduce more and more devices, so they're prone to attacks. That's why they also decided to switch to Zero Trust architecture completely. If you like this video, please help me with this YouTube's algorithm that doesn't want to show my channel to more people. So I hope you who have watched my video till the end can help me with that. Please subscribe to my channel, please like my video, and let me know what you think about Zero Trust architecture. Do you like it, or you would be more comfortable with having perimeter-based architecture because it's less fast, obviously? And why do you think that more companies should switch to Zero Trust architecture? Or maybe if you were part of this switch, do you like working? What way of working do you like more? Zero Trust security model or perimeter security model? I will wait for your thoughts. Thank you for being with me today, and have a nice day. Bye.